Hello, Merry Christmas, and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. The decorations are up, Santa's revving up his sleigh, and the presents are virtually on their way to being opened, depending on when you're listening to this. But like a kid on Christmas Eve, I'm far more excited for Thursday, the 26th of December, as I get to be part of 7,000 Waysiders going to Ewood Park on Boxing Day. Just what you want. Big old game. We've got a returning guest who's returning after 2 years away because we keep playing Blackburn on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and apparently now Thursdays, but I've decided to get money anyway, in the shape of Ian from Blackburn Rovers podcast, 4,000 Holds. Ian, how are you doing, mate? It's been a while.
It has been a while, yeah. I mean, we've had some interesting encounters this Sunderland. Obviously, the last one at the Stadium of Light is the one that I particularly enjoyed. My first visit to the Stadium of Light that wasn't music related, I have to say, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. What I'd give for a repeat of that scoreline tomorrow, but we shall see. Not tomorrow, sorry, Thursday. We're not recording this on Christmas Day. That would be insane.
The days are all mixed up, mate. I don't think anyone knows what day it is. Look, first and foremost, are you ready for Christmas? Most importantly, are you ready for that hectic period of championship fixtures?
I was going to say, in terms of being ready for Christmas, I literally was wrapping Christmas presents in the lead up to this starting. Not saying I'm leaving it to pretty much the last minute, but I think we're there or thereabouts. The tree's up, the food's bought. I did battle in Waitrose and Sainsbury's this morning to get those elusive items that we were missing. So, yeah, bring on Christmas Day. And unlike yourself, I think Boxing Day is one of those classic standout football fixture days, isn't it? That you look forward to at the beginning of the season when the lists come out. Who we got on Boxing Day? Who have we got on New Year's Day? Who have we got at Easter? That kind of thing. They're the ones that you look for. So, yeah, it should be good.
I had a colleague this morning who doesn't like football going, why do they play on Boxing Day? Because it's the best day of the year, that's why, and just accept it.
Gets you out of the house and so on.
Yeah, it's the only thing that gets me out of the house is football, unfortunately. And apparently shopping for the Christmas food at Marks and Spencer's. No, I'm not rich. I just had a voucher. We'll start with the weekend. Look, while we were beating Norwich City, you were losing away to Millwall. It's never an easy place to go, but a late defeat for those who don't know. What was your view on Millwall 1, Blackburn 0?
I think it had 0-0 written all over it until Lewis Travis went off and we'd used our 3 substitution slots. So we had to play what turned out to be probably nearer 12 minutes with 10 men. And it just unsettled us enough, I think, in terms of trying to rearrange it. Andy Wyman ended up playing central midfield, and we just lost balance. And it was a well worked cross, I have to say. And it's one of those, as a defensive coach, you'd look at it and say he shouldn't have been allowed such an easy header at that stage of the game. But I can kind of forgive them because it had unsettled the side, but it was a horrible game. It was really grim stuff, and it deserved to be a 0-0 because nobody really deserved to come out of it. But as you say, Millwall is not an easy place to go, except for us in recent years. We actually have had a reasonable track record against Millwall. So if you're a stats fatalist as I am, you sort of say, oh well, would you to lose one there? So that duly turned up, and that ended our run of 6 straight wins, which I think has probably flattered to deceive. I think people looking at our position in the league table and looking at those results and say, oh, you're going really well. And I would sort of say, well, we're playing the percentages. And at some point, if you bet on black coming up on the roulette table and it comes up 6 times consecutively, I know it is a 50-50 chance that it will come again next time, but there's something at the back of your mind that says, red's due, isn't it? Red's due a turn. Well, I think Saturday was our red coming up on the roulette wheel, so we'll see what happens when we play you guys.
Quite interesting. You said you had a good record at Millwall, and I've just remembered that glorious day when you went to Millwall and won 4-3. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Good day.
I was playing cricket that day. Well, actually, to be technical, I was umpiring a cricket match that day. And everyone knew that I was a Rovers fan. And at 3-1 down at half time, it wasn't a big deal that it was on live in the pavilion and I was out on the field. And then when Rovers got it back to 3-3, they said, I think somebody should tell Ian and give him the option of coming back in to watch the last 10 minutes. So they did, thankfully. And I went back in and saw the winning goal. I thought, hang on a minute, surely not. And of course, then you immediately get your phone out of it. Preston. God bless Preston. I knew that they'd do that to us and allow you up. But it was hard to be anything other than pleased for Tony Mowbray, I think, at that point. Because I think, he still has a lot of affection in the hearts of Rovers fans.
And Sunderland, very much so. Hope he's doing well.
Seems to be on the road to recover, which is great news.
He does, mate. Yeah, always good news. We loved him here. He was here a shorter time, but I don't think anyone that I know had a bad word to say about Tony Mowbray. But In terms of Blackburn, look, defeat's never nice. As I said, it's a tough place to go. We've struggled to win at Millwall. We've struggled to lose at Millwall, I guess. But it's a tough place to go. It's a cliche, but it is. But that defeat ended a run of, which bizarrely shocked me because I feel like no one spoke about this. You'd won 6 consecutive games. You conceded just one goal. I don't know why I haven't noticed this or why it hasn't been made more of because with all due respect to Blackburn, I probably didn't have you in the top 6, but you're sitting in 5th ahead of the game. You're having this really good, sort of unexpectedly good season where I think most people would have placed you between 10th and potentially 15th because you've lost your best player, which we'll come on to as well.
Yep.
But how much fun is that first sort of 6 months of the season being a Blackburn Rovers fan? Because it's always more fun when it's a little bit unexpected, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly unexpected. Let be no doubt about that. I think we did a pre-season prediction pod, and I think the most optimistic person on it had us like sort of between 8th and 10th. I had us probably 15th or 16th. And that was only after we'd done a last minute shopping trolley dash before the window closed. And we brought in 2 or 3 players in right at the death. Until then, it looked like we were going to struggle to actually put out a squad with a full complement of substitutes at one point. So for us to have got off to a decent start, I think took some of the pressure off and took pressure off Eustace as well because last season we struggled to win at Ewood, so he took over in first week of February, I think it was, and technically we won the first game after his appointment, but he didn't select the team, and whilst he came down from the director's box and did that thing of waving arms at half time, I don't think that victory was really his, and we went the rest of the season without winning at home. So it was difficult to make a judgment call on the impact that he'd actually had because most fans you'll see the home games and you maybe go to a handful of away ones. Obviously, with the TV deal, a lot of Rovers fans saw us win at Leeds and saw that astonishing last day win at Leicester, where thankfully I think they'd been partying hard at Jamie Vardy's house and weren't taking the game too seriously, and that win kept us up. It would have been horrific to have gone down after all of that trauma. So I think our expectations were structured there. We got off to a decent start and then it ebbed and flowed, and we did a bit of a thing that we did under John Dahl Thomason, which is we then got on a bit of a sticky run through October where we couldn't score a goal, and then the wins started. As we said, we had a run of 6 consecutive wins, most of them by 1-0. Which is something that kind of gladdens the heart of the purist, I think. I managed to, I think we had a discussion on one of our podcasts, and I managed to write my column for the local paper, recalling, I'm of a vintage where I can remember when Howard Kendall was Blackburn Rovers manager. And in 1980-81, he guided us to within a point of promotion to the then First Division off the back of scoring 42 goals in a 42-game season. And I always like to point out to younger people, you can be ruthlessly efficient with the number of goals that you score, providing that you don't leak them at the other end. And that season we had, I think, 13 1-0 wins or something like that. It was just insane. And Rovers this season, this has been the closest incarnation I think I've seen to that side and the way that they play, which is first and foremost, don't concede. Don't do anything silly. Be robust. Be organised. And then if we get a chance, let's keep our fingers crossed that we can take it. Rovers struggle when they concede first. I think that's our biggest challenge, because then if the opposition has less of an imperative to come out and leave those spaces, we haven't got enough in our attacking third, I think, to unpick a well-mastered defence. So our successes this season, where we've had them, have been invariably when we've sort of like withheld pressure, scored, and then the opposition's gone off. I'm crying out, how on earth did that happen? I've come out to try and equalise, and we go, this is great. We're under no pressure here. And Eustace does seem to have us really, really well organised. So fair play to him for doing that. But it can't sustain, you sense. You sense that we're in something of a false position. But having got us to that position, I think what the fans would like to see is Eustace to be backed in the January window. We haven't really spent any money for a number of years. And of course, we sold Adam Armstrong for 15 million. We sold Sammy Smodics. We got some money for David Raya when he moved from Brentford to Arsenal. So there is headroom in PSR. But our owners seem to be reluctant to sanction the sort of spending that brought in Ben Brereton Diaz a few years ago, for instance. So we are definitely, if we are going to bring players in January, I suspect it's going to be loans. And we'll just have to hope that they can hit the ground running and give us what we need to sustain that challenge. But we're at the point of the season already where we're seeing suspensions, we're seeing injuries. And so the squad is starting to be stretched perhaps just a little bit beyond its elastic limit. So that's the worry, I think, over the next few weeks, is if we don't bring players in, then this terrific start against all odds and expectations will just toss away another chance to get in the playoffs, which will possibly be the third time that we've done that the last 6 years or something like that.
Talked about Tony Mowbray and similarities and playing on off air. We talk about playing on Boxing Day every 6 years or whatever. It's not that quite frequent, but it's often. One thing that's similar to both of us is that we've both succeeded this season by selling our best player, arguably from last season, to Ipswich. I know how we've managed to cope, but how have Blackburn coped? Because I'll be honest, he was a total pain in the arse against us last year, especially in the reverse fixing. You could see he had just something a little bit more above the championship level, I think.
Yeah, I think Smodic sadly might turn out to be one of those players that's too good for the Championship but not good enough for the Premier League. I'm thinking of the likes of Rob Earnshaw and people like that seem to bounce around. Clubs will get promoted, they'd sign them, they'd fail, they'd come back down to the Championship, they score 30 goals and have another go, kind of thing. There are a number of players who are a bit like that. Smodics was a revelation for us after John Dal Thomason got a hold of him. I think Thomason polarised the Rovers squad, but while we were winning, it was okay. I think they went with it. And Smodics did a really in-depth podcast interview in which he talked about his admiration for John Dal Thomason, but he did openly admit that after a few weeks of working under Thomason, he asked for a transfer. He told his agent, "You've got to get me out of here. I don't understand what this guy wants me to do." And he sort of said, well, all of a sudden it clicked. Oh, that run. Oh, you want me to make that run? And then the players, when they saw him make that run, would find him with the pass. And then he'd score. He'd go, oh, that's what you want me to do. Right, I get it now. And I would say that in the camp, Smodics was probably one of John Dal Thomason's biggest advocates and was definitely a product of Thomason's coaching. Thomason's coaching lifted him up at least one or two levels, I think, what would have been his natural expectations. The problem was there weren't enough players in the squad who felt similarly and saw their performance levels rise. So when things started to go a bit awry this time last year, morale dropped very quickly. So see Manchester City this year, that's kind of what we did in December last year, where we just didn't turn up and things came to a head, and that's how Eustace came in. So Smodics became our focal point. He became our lifeboat in many respects. We were massively over-reliant on him, and every time he went down after a challenge, it was hearts in mouth stuff, because last season, I think if he'd been injured and missed even 3 or 4 games, we'd have gone down. There's no doubt about that. The way that we're set up this year is we are not dependent on any one single player. We are spreading the goals around, or rather spreading, the very few goals that we get are distributed across the team. That's our biggest weakness, is that we have not got somebody who can unpick a defence that's well organised. Smodics could make those darting runs and could get in between defenders and would just unsettle them. We are incredibly predictable, I think, in our attack this year. We've got Yuki Ohashi from Japan, who's now a Japanese international, who started really brightly and looked, if I can make a comparison, as a sort of like a Poundland Son Heung-min type player. So that's not meant in any way as being casual racism. I know he's Japanese, I know Son Heung-min's South Korean, but in terms of style of play, they're very similar. He's very busy, very industrious, chases back, closes players down, and he's scored some absolute humdingers in August and September, but he hasn't scored since the 14th of September. And then the other striker that we brought in the summer is Maktar Gay, who is huge. He's quite the unit. And we got quite excited in pre-season friendlies when he was banging them in against the likes of Stockport County. I thought, we've unearthed something here. He then became a bit of a cult hero for getting sent off against Burnley, perversely. But he's really struggled in recent weeks, really struggled. Thankfully, he's got his first league goal, and the hope now that opens up the floodgates a little bit and he can start to contribute. So that's where our problems are. It's been a case of replacing Smodics by changing the style a little bit and trying to spread the workload. But the fact that we haven't scored that many goals suggests that it's not working quite as they would have hoped.
Talking about defence, I don't think anyone will be surprised to see that you've been good defensively when you have Danny Bart at the heart of it. We really liked him. I think, there'll be fans somewhere that didn't mind him leaving. I was what I feel like might be the majority that wasn't happy to see him leave. He won our player of the season in the first season he came up.
Yeah.
Solid player, went to Norwich for like buttons and then ends up with Blackburn. And I think it was October, he was up for Championship Player of the Month. I think I know the answer to this because I feel like anyone I've ever asked about Danny Bart that is associated with him in any way, like a Stoke fan or whatever it may be, Chef Wed, I think he was at as well, have all said the same thing. Yeah, love him, great. But I'll ask it anyway. How well have you taken to Danny Bart?
Well, the irony of Danny Bart is not lost on us. We nearly signed him when he went to Norwich.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
Apparently, the story, if you believe it, is that he was offered a 2-year deal, drove to Rovers training ground to sign, and then when he was presented with the terms was a 1-year deal with a 1-year option in the club's favour. And he said, that's not what you offered me, apparently. In the nicest possible way, went and got in his car and drove away. And the rumour was that Venkis didn't want to give a 2-year contract to someone of his age. Now, the mitigant for that was that we had Daniel Ayara, who really, really struggled with injuries. And I think they'd looked at his fitness record and sort of said, well, we're not signing another centre-back who's, what would he be at that time, 30, 31, 32, was kind of thing. We're not giving a 2-year deal to someone of that age. So we didn't sign him. We didn't give him a 2-year deal 2 years ago, but we gave him a 12-month deal 12 months ago. That was okay, apparently. So that's Venky's management in action, effectively. So it was a bit odd to see him eventually make it to Rovers. I'm sure he chuckled under his breath. He came in as a result of an injury to Hayden Carter, and I think his calming influence on Dom Hyam has raised Dom Hyam's performance level significantly, because I think Dom Hyam was starting to struggle. He'd had a few ropey performances and his confidence was low. But there's one other factor in our defence, which is an interesting one, and unless you're on the training ground, it's hard to be categoric about this. But we signed a player called Carl McFadzean from Coventry City last year. Just about January last year it was, he came in. So he came in as a 36, 37-year-old. So obviously he's a 37, 38-year-old. He hasn't really played this year. He's only come in as on, I think on one occasion as a substitute. But in that away game at Burnley where we played half an hour with 10 men, Carl McFadzean was warming up on the touchline, constantly giving instructions to the back four, constantly pointing and cajoling them and coaching them. And I wonder if the combination of McFadzean and Bart coming in has just given Rovers' defence a bit more nous this season, and we're not quite as naive. And as a result of that, we're more organised. It's hard to know, I say, unless you're on the training ground. But certainly Danny Bart, he's won Player of the Month on our polls post-match. He's won the club's official Player of the Month. He's definitely won the hearts and minds. I think he's one of those players now that we admire. And the conversation is, I wish we'd signed him 2 years ago. But we are where we are. Thank you, Venkis. We eventually got him, but I think he's one of those that you probably want to keep him around as long as his fitness holds up between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sure people will point me out on this, but Danny Bart, I can only ever remember one striker absolutely torture him, and he was Gyökeres, which is apparently he's doing
That's
quite
fair enough,
well.
I think. Yeah. I think he's quite good, isn't he?
Apparently he's doing all right. I don't know where he's gone, but not too bad apparently. One other player I'm really interested in, this more kind of where I live, because as people know, my day job is covering Scottish football, and one, do I want to say maverick? I think just interesting character was Todd Cantwell. He seemed to love being at Rangers.
I think is the word I would use.
Enigma is 100% the right word. Social media influencer would be another 3.
Boy band pop star.
But yeah, he look, he fitted in well at Rangers. Then the manager changed. We won't mention who the manager was. Clement comes in, and it hasn't really worked for him. And he would play regularly. He would show some real signs of quality, but eventually he ended up, his career at Rangers was similar to the one at Norwich and the one at other clubs he's been at, flattered to deceive by the end of it. But I've kept a close eye on him for obvious reasons. I work in that arena, and if he does something good, we will write about it. I notice he still likes a wee flirt with Rangers via his Instagram now and again, and he's often been criticised for social media presence, hence the joke before, but he looks like he's producing for Blackburn. And I know it's early doors, so that might change. We've seen this before at Norwich. We've seen this before at Rangers. But how has he fit in? Because he's obviously come in under a little bit of a cloud from what's happened at previous clubs, not just Rangers.
Yeah, I think. Well, he himself said he did a really, really good in-depth interview with one of the local press guys, Elliot Jackson, for the Lancashire Telegraph, and he basically sort of said. I think Elliot said something along the lines of not quite as brutal as this. Well, if your career had gone to plan, you wouldn't be here, would you? And he kind of went, no, almost certainly not, kind of thing. You don't end up at Blackburn Rovers having signed for 500,000 if 5 years ago you were the next big thing, unless something's gone dreadfully wrong, kind of thing. What Cantwell did do is he came across in that interview as incredibly self-aware, in as much as there aren't that many last chance saloons left for me to drink in. That this possibly is like the last one if I've got any aspirations whatsoever. I think we've signed him in the hope of polishing him, and then him either driving us to promotion single-handedly, a bit like Smodix, I suppose you'd say, last year, or we flog him for 5 million in 6 months and 12 months' time because he's turning in 8 out of 10 performances every week. So I think that's the hope from Rovers board's perspective. There's definitely a talent there that is unique in our squad, and by that I mean in terms of things that he does, things that he can pull off, passes that he sees. You watch it. I can only watch on TV at Premier League level. Trent Alexander-Arnold seems to see a pass that nobody else has seen. Odegaard for Arsenal sees a pass that nobody else has seen. Now, I'm not saying that Cantwell is of that stature, but in our squad, he's doing things that nobody else in the squad would see. So you look and think, oh, hello. Oh, that's that. Well, that was good. Yeah. All right. I see what's what. But then, as I'm sure any number of fans will testify, he doesn't do the simple thing or the necessary graft of always necessarily tracking back or covering or doing the hard labour in defence. Or he goes missing for 5 or 10 minutes in a game when you're sort of thinking, come on, Todd, get on the ball, do something, own this situation. He's a bit too passive. So what we've seen is several man of the match performances where he's looked really, really good. He looked fantastic. I think earlier in the season, I think it was against QPR, where he played a couple of really cheeky diagonal balls and created goals from nothing. One of them for Danny Bart, as I recall. And then he'd go missing in difficult away games. So I think we've seen enough to understand how he could infuriate a fan base, but I think we've seen enough to understand why we've taken the gamble and how we might hope that we get something out of him. Jury's out, I think, at the moment, but he definitely gives us something, and for the fee, for us, it's definitely worth the gamble. He spoke very, very eloquently about John Eustace when he signed. But then again, I suppose you could argue, man praises new boss. That's not exactly a news story, but the way that he spoke and the amount of detail that he went into about how and why Eustace had persuaded him to sign for Blackburn Rovers was exactly the sort of stuff that you want to hear. And as I say, he has been self-deprecating enough to acknowledge that he's at Blackburn Rovers because things haven't gone well. So this is an opportunity for us to benefit from his desire to optimise the talent that he undoubtedly has. So jury's out, time will tell. Early signs, quite promising. Still some way to go, though, I think.
It's an interesting character because I agree. He's one of those players that should be at high level in the Championship. I think he's quite clearly got the ability and talent for the Premier League or, similar level of division, maybe in Europe. And there's something missing, and yet when you hear him speak, I think he is really eloquent and intelligent and self-aware. And you think, well, where the fucking hell has this gone wrong? But thankfully for us, he hasn't quite worked out where it's gone wrong yet, and we play you on Boxing Day. So I hope he continues finding it and discovers it
Well,
after Boxing Day.
he's not the first footballer to not
No,
maximise his
he's
talent,
not.
is he? But he's
Not
still
at all.
young enough to do something about it. We can but see. But I'm glad we've got him because, as I say, he adds something to our squad that we don't have. So it'd be interesting to see if Eustace can get it out of him on a consistent basis. In which case, as I say, he'll either fire us to promotion or we'll flog him for 10 million. So either way, we get something out of it, hopefully.
The last time we faced each other, I feel like Blackburn saw the most brutal version of Sunderland 23-24. It was Easter Monday. I went down. I had that 3-4 hour journey back on the train where I just had to go, what am I doing? And it was in the cusp of that terrible second half of the season, still dealing with the aftermath of Michael Beale, rudderless, good players that you knew were good players, just directionless. But we're 8 months on, we're battling for automatic promotion. We're doing well. Things have been fixed. So far, it's been a really fun season. What have you made of Sunderland's progress? Because you played us in April and beat us 5-1. You've seen the worst version of Sunderland, in my opinion. And now,
That was an astonishing day, I have to say. We
oh,
travelled absolutely in hope, not expectation, because we were struggling last season to get points on the board. And those away wins at Sunderland, Leeds, and Leicester were ultimately what saved our bacon. Sunderland, for me, as I say, I'm of a vintage where I can remember wanting Sunderland to win the 1973 FA Cup final because you didn't want dirty Leeds to win it, and I've always sort of like carried a little bit of a torch, shall we say, since then. The cliche is it's a massive club, but it is. That day I was looking at the attendance and sort of thinking we need two or probably three home fixtures to get this number of fans in. So with that resource, that fan base, with the owners that are like ours are undoubtedly wealthy, all the groundwork and all the foundations are there, and you felt it just needed somebody to come along and sort it out, I suppose you'd say. So I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that you're up there. I'm surprised it's happened as quickly as it has. I think is possibly my observation. But you've got some players that are talked about, the likes of Rigg and Bellingham and players like that. You've lost Jack Clark, as we've talked about, who was always a thorn in our side. Always. Absolutely love him to bits. I think he's a really, really great player. So I think it's a surprise that it's happened so quickly. I'd be interested from Sunderland fans' perspective. Do you think it's sustainable? What do you expect in January? Because I think, to greater or lesser extents, we're both sort of like defying expectations pre-season. Although I think there was one pundit. Was it? What's it called?
Gab Sutton said we'd win the
Gav
league.
Sutton said you were going to win the league. Yeah. And I remember reading that thinking, wow, that's a bit left field. And then he got up to a great sort of, maybe he knows something. Maybe watching all those games and doing all that punditry means he knows something. I don't know.
I did drug test him. He is a friend, and I did drug test him, but he was completely clean, I've got to say. But
It's a good call. That was the way things have turned out, for sure.
I think I'd largely agree, though. Like, look, I think I've always knew the team's good enough to be where we're at. Did I expect us to be fourth in the table at Christmas? Well, I predicted we'd finish eighth, and I was being the more positive of the from where we were to where we want where we are right now. You're kind of hoping the manager and the players immediately switch, and thankfully for us, they kind of have, and the players we brought in has sort of worked. But off topic completely, I'm going to ask you the last two questions after this. The bog standard: who would you take and why, and what are you going to win by, or lose by, or draw by, or draw? We've played each other 3 times in the past 23 years on Boxing Day, oddly enough, and 4 times in total in our history, 3 times on Christmas Day as well. But in terms of the Boxing Day fixtures, can you guess how many times Blackburn have won those fixtures and what the aggregate score is?
Oof. Well, the answer to those questions is no and no. I can't. I'm struggling. I'm struggling. I suspect you've had the upper hand in terms of victories.
So, in terms of the reason I asked the question, you'd be right. Sunderland have won 3. You've drawn 1 and you've lost the other. And the aggregate score at the minute is 8-2. But only one of them have come at Ewood Park. For those of a certain vintage, which makes me feel very old because it feels like yesterday, I remember us winning 3-0, and I just know that Jason McAteer scored. And I think God, Kevin Kilban might have scored, but I could be completely wrong with it. But yeah, so the omens are good unless you do what you did earlier and you think low of averages, we're
What you
knackered.
want, yeah.
Yes. As I said before, two final questions. Which player would you take from Sunderland squad to put into Blackburn's? Again, doesn't have to be our best player, just a player you think would fit in. Who would you take and why would you take him?
The player that we probably need is a player that's no longer with you because you sold him to Southampton and then he got injured, which is Stewart. I think he's exactly the kind of striker that we're crying out for right now. So whoever you replaced him with, we'll have him. But obviously, the two names that trip off the tongue is Joe Bellingham. And I don't know who it is he reminds me of, but he has a certain style of somebody that rings bells. And Chris Rigg is the other one, isn't he? That's sort of supposedly destined for great things. So as Rovers taking young players and sell them on as a profit, that's probably who the CEO would go for. But I think, as I say, the irony of it is we probably would have liked someone like Ross Stewart. I think he would have been the person that I know he's no longer with you, but I think there was somebody was speculating as to whether we could get him on loan from Southampton. They said no, he's still injured, which it seems a dreadful shame. I think his career is sort of like petering out if he's not careful.
I really hope not, but you'll never find anyone on this podcast, be it the guests that are with me after the games or me doing the preview shows, that will disagree with the Ross Stewart love. I love Ross Stewart, and I hope he gets better soon. And if he does, he's welcome back to us in January if you prefer it.
He likes red and white stripes. Yeah,
he does, yeah, so it seems. I'm going on Thursday. So I'm really hoping it's going to be a big win because it's now better than 7,000 anyway, and going there and winning. But like I say, because of 7,000 of us, I'm feeling like we're in really good form, to be fair. We've won 3 of the last 4, but my prediction is going to be 1-1. I think it's a tricky away game. I think you probably will sit defence first.
Yes, definitely.
Sometimes that can be difficult to break down, just in general, whether you're Sunderland or whoever. I was going to say Man City, but it doesn't really ring true anymore, does it? But what's your prediction? How are you feeling about Thursday?
Well, we haven't had a drawn game for quite a while, so I think you've stolen my prediction. I think Rovers will probably be happy with the point. I think what we want to avoid at all costs is back-to-back defeats, because that happened to us earlier in the season when we had our ropey run. We sort of got into that mentality of I don't know, just a bit of mental weakness and not having the resilience to bounce back. What I'm hoping to see this week is that we've got some astonishing games coming up. We've got you guys, we've got Leeds, we've got Burnley. So those are all tough games. There's a Hull City home match in the middle of that, which everybody seems to have marked down as an easy 3 points. And so, you've got a new manager bounce scenario going on there. So I think we've got a very, very challenging set of fixtures coming up. And we're starting to see suspensions and injuries mount up. So right now, if you sort of said shake hands on one all, I definitely would. I think I'd say it's probably 60-40 a Sunderland win. But having said that, we've beaten Leeds at home. We've beaten Middlesbrough away when they were free scoring. So there's no reason why to sort of think if we set up and we are as resilient as we have been in recent weeks, why we couldn't nick another 1-0. And that would be a brilliant result from our perspective, obviously, because then it would take us within 3 points of you guys with a game in hand. So that would be really good. But if I'm being scrupulously honest, I'd take a point there.
I think I would, to be fair, as long as we score lateness in the last minute, because otherwise it'll be a bit crap if it's the other way around. Depends how you get the draw when you go and actually go into the game and then the away end. But it's been really nice to catch up, mate. I hope you have a great Christmas. Apart from,
and you,
well, actually, no, have a great Christmas. Boxing Day, I hope it's awful.
Christmas ends at midnight on Christmas Day. Yeah, so have a great Christmas. Yeah.
Hope you have a fucking shit Boxing Day. But good to speak to you again, mate, as always. Thank you.